Zimbabwe is seeing gains come at breakneck speed, 5%, 10%, even 20% in a single session. Now you tally them up and the market is up an astonishing 800% year on year. But in a country where up is often down and the next currency crisis is always just around the corner, the furious rally is a cause for concern, not jubilation. It's a telltale sign, market observers say, that investors are bracing for an inflation spiral and seeking a hedge to protect the value of their money. According to reports, Zimbabwe stocks on a bourse which was established in 1894 and is among Africa's oldest have easily outsprinted 2023's other big gainers. That price attraction has attracted around 23,000 retail investors, but financial analysts are urging caution. Dr. Prosper Chitambara, developmental economist, joins me from Harare, Zimbabwe now. Dr. Chitambara, welcome once again to Business Edge. As always, a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
So when we look at this, we're seeing Zimbabwe's stock market with gains that have been very rapid. Some might even be saying that they're too rapid, 5%, 10%, 20% in single sessions. Give us an idea of what's really driving this rally.
Yeah, no, so first it's important to highlight that these are nominal increases, but they are still quite good given that they are way above the annual inflation rate. So I think what's been driving this trend is the high inflation, which has motivated a lot of investors to want to hedge against that high inflation by investing on the stock market. And there are not many possible investment opportunities, especially for the small investors. So the stock market has generally been seen as a more viable investment market by smaller investors and even by institutional investors who are really seeking to hedge their Zimbabwe dollars against inflation.
It's interesting you say that there's not a lot of space for the smaller investor, because we've heard about numbers for retail investors, which are those individual mom and pops, as we might call them, around 23,000. So who are the people who are really making the buys right now within the Zimbabwean stock market?
Yeah, so it's really a combination of the big institutional investors, the corporates, the pension funds, and also the smaller investors, like even the individuals, those people that have a bit of excess Zimbabwe dollar, and they are looking at probably trying to preserve the value of their Zim dollars. So I think the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange has really provided a good platform for the smaller investors, and obviously also for the bigger investors with excess Zim dollar liquidity. So that's why we've seen these high volumes and the positive trends in terms of numbers.
All right, so when we put all these numbers together, we're looking at about 800% year-on-year gain, which many would say normally is something to, of course, celebrate. But in terms of reflecting where Zimbabwe's economy is this in any way a genuine improvement, a reflection of a genuine improvement in the economy? Or what is it really pointing us towards? This race, as you said, towards hedging against the currency, what does it show us?
Well, it's a bit tricky. It doesn't reflect a robust state of the economy. As you know, our economy has been undergoing hyperinflation. And so if you consider that, for example, it shows that the economy is actually in deep challenges, macroeconomic instability. So I would also probably define some of the investments we've seen on the stock market as being largely speculative investors by speculators who have been taking advantage of some of the distortions in the economy, for example, with respect to the disparities between the interest rates and the inflation rate. For a long time, our inflation numbers in real terms were actually negative, which actually gave rise to a lot of speculative borrowings. And people were using the process from those borrowings to actually invest on the stock market. So we've seen a lot of speculators trying to take advantage of distortions within the market, within the economy, and making investments on the stock exchange. But like I'm saying, there's a disconnect, obviously, between the performance of our economy on the one hand and the performance of the stock market. What we've also seen, obviously, there's also been some migration, because now the government has also set up a USD stock exchange, the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. So we've also seen over the past few months, there's been some migration by corporates who have been delisting from the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange and relisting on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange because of some of the incentives that the government has actually come up with, and they're offering investors on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. So there's been quite an increase in activity on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange as well.
Okay.
But it's not really reflective of the state of the economy, given the challenges that we are actually experiencing at a macroeconomic level.
Okay, so I'll come back to this, but when you mention the speculators, it does make me want to ask about concerns that some have said in terms of market manipulation or even insider trading in relation to the recent rally. Do you think there's any of that going on? We see the speculation when it comes to, of course, the Zim dollar and the US dollar and what happens particularly on the, as you said, macroeconomic level. But when it comes to this market rally, are there really genuine concerns in terms of market manipulation or the potential for this to be more reflective of insider trading?
We haven't really heard of those stories within the public media, for example, media space, for example, but it could be happening. But I think it's not something that has been reported so far. So I would say I don't think it's been happening on a large scale.
Okay, so not happening on a large scale. So let's come back to, of course, what we see now. As you said, with the high inflation, the hyperinflation as it stands now, Zimbabwe, unfortunately, is a country that's prone to currency crisis, market volatility, hyperinflation, and now even has a very high annual consumer prices index, which is going over about 100%. When we look at this rally, and as you said, it's not a reflection of what's happening at the macroeconomic level. What are the biggest concerns you have right now about what this rally is telling us about the health of the Zimbabwean economy as well as the stock market?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest concern is that as long as we continue to inflate, as long as we continue to have these high annual inflation numbers or even month-on-month numbers, I think we are probably going to continue to see the rallying up of the stock exchange. So there's probably an inverse relationship between macroeconomic stability on the one hand and the performance of the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, which, well, I think the rallying is also positive in the sense that it's probably helping companies also to mobilize a bit of additional resources or liquidity to be able to reinvest in their businesses. But once we get a grip on the macroeconomy, I'm sure the bubble on the stock exchange will probably burst. So the instability really has been driving the solid performance of the stock exchange in the country.
So let's dig deeper into this solid performance. As you mentioned earlier, there's not that many options. So Dr. Chitambara, what are the stocks that you see that are driving the most gains? What stocks seem to really be holding Zimbabwe's stock market or its burst together right now?
Well, I think the financial and services counters have been doing quite well, have proved to be quite resistant, the banking counters, and also even construction and mining. Those are sectors that have actually been doing very well, and the counters associated with those sectors have also obviously been doing very well, and that has driven the overall performance on the stock exchange. So I would say those key sectors: mining, agriculture has also done very well, and agricultural companies have also reaped the benefits. So we've had a fairly good agricultural season, good rainfall season, and agricultural counters have also done well on account of those factors. Then the construction, we've also been having a mini construction boom, massive investments in construction by both private individuals, high net worth individuals, and also the corporates. A few months ago, we saw the opening up of one of the big malls, and in fact, the number of malls have actually been opened up. So construction has been booming. And construction counters have also obviously benefited from that boom.
Interesting. So now that takes care of the local side, because earlier you did mention that foreign investors seem to be delisting from the Zimbabwe markets, moving themselves to the Victoria Falls, I beg your pardon, stock exchange. Yeah. So let's talk about foreign investors very quickly. In terms of the rally we're seeing, what contribution do you think foreign investors are making to this current rally that the burst is experiencing?
Well, there hasn't been much new foreign investments coming in, apart from what I've already mentioned, that we've seen some counters actually moving to the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. I think it's largely on account of the uncertainties associated with the instability that the economy has actually been facing, and also obviously the political uncertainties associated with the elections. But we are hoping that probably once the elections are done and dusted, we will probably see more foreign investment and capital inflows actually, especially on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, given the very, very good incentives that the government has actually come up with on that front. So far, foreign investments, it's been, I think a number of investors have adopted probably wait and see attitude, but we think that maybe after elections, then we could see an improvement in terms of capital inflows and foreign direct investment inflows in general.
Okay. So let's go back in time a little bit, because back in 2020, authorities actually shut down the exchange for about 5 weeks, complaining that speculation in stocks with overseas listings were undermining the Zimbabwe dollar. And now there's a bit of concern. We're hearing that locals might be worried that regulators will also put an end to this current party and rally we're seeing. Do you think there's similar concerns about what happened in 2020 with what the Zimbabwe stock market is experiencing right now, and even concerns about the transparency of the stock market itself?
Well, I think I don't think the authorities would want to go that route. I think given the implications that actually had on the economy, so I think they've probably learned their lesson. So I think in terms of regulations, they will lean more towards moral suasion and not towards this kind of controls that do more harm to the economy than actually good. So I'm quite optimistic that I think going forward, we are not going to be seeing those heavy-handed regulatory responses by authorities, especially on the stock exchange and even on the whole macroeconomy. We've also had controls, price controls, for example, in the past, but the authorities don't seem to be leaning towards controls and regulations from what I've seen over the past few years and even few months.
Fantastic to hear. So now, in terms of these gains we've seen in recent times, we can put our fingers as to what's accounting for that. There's a hedge. People are looking for a way to hedge against inflation. They're also, of course, having some concerns about the local currency and not being able to easily access US dollars. How long do you think this rally will last? 800% year on year. Fantastic, but as you said, nominal numbers when you really get down to it. But how long do you think that we can see this rally lasting in Zimbabwe's stock market?
I expect that at least for the foreseeable future, for the next few months, until probably after elections, I think there's going to be a massive rally on the stock exchange. And I'm hoping that maybe after elections, we'll see the new government trying to ensure greater sustainability and stability within the macroeconomy, which could probably see that rally actually slowing down a bit. So I think it also depends on what happens on the inflationary front. Once we are able to get a good grip on that, then I'm sure they'll be slowing down in terms of the stock market rally that we've been experiencing.
And yeah, that takes me to my final question. We know lots of fingers are pointing at the administration of President Emerson Mnangagwa. High inflation now, about 176% as of June. And while you said earlier that this rally, this 800% year on year, is not reflective of what's happening at the local level, is there any impact of what's happening at the stock market that you're seeing at the local level, at the macroeconomic level, whether positive or negative, even small? So seeing this sudden upturn, and one that you say will last into the next several months before Zimbabwe goes into elections, what do you think the impact will eventually be, or the impact we should expect on the economy from this?
Yeah, so the general impact really is that once the stock exchange is doing very well, it's good for the local investors that have invested, because it means more capital is actually being mobilized. But in terms of real impact on the ground, it's really difficult to say there's been very substantive impact on the ground. Of course, we've seen a lot of counters. They've been quite resilient in the face of the challenges, the weight of the macroeconomic challenges. So probably that could be a positive development of the rally on the local bourse, in that has helped a lot of companies to remain resilient under the weight of so much macroeconomic pressures being brought to bear on them.
All right, Dr. Prosper Chisambara, developmental economist. We'll leave the conversation at that. We always, of course, are checking in with what's happening with Zimbabwe and expecting to see more updates in the future. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.